Most people think divorce is something you survive. But what if it's actually something you can navigate with clarity, dignity, and far less damage than you were told to expect? Today, we're pulling back the curtain on what really happens when couples choose mediation over war, and why the strongest move in divorce might be learning how to have the hardest conversations of your life the right way. Welcome back. Welcome to Divorcing Strong, the podcast that pulls no punches when it comes to divorce. I'm Becky Sampson, better known as Bulldog Becky Brockovich, and I'm here to give you the straight talk, the strategies, and the subpoena secrets you won't hear anywhere else. With expert guests and proven advice, you'll learn your rights, your options, and gain your power that encourages a fair and equitable outcome. Divorce doesn't have to break you. It can build you. Let's get to it. Well, welcome back to everybody for another episode of Divorcing Strong podcast. I am your host, Becky Sampson, and I always love doing these podcasts. And there's a lot of work that kind of goes into getting the guests, getting them on. And I hope that you enjoy and find value in the people that we bring on, because every single one of them is doing hard work. I'm telling you, being in the divorce space is not always the easiest. And even being a divorce attorney and mediator, it is a lot of work. So today we're going to be actually interviewing a mediator who's also a divorce attorney. So on today's episode of Divorcing Strong, I'm joined by David Fein, an attorney whose journey through law and life has uniquely equipped him to help people find peaceful ground in some of the most painful transitions. After more than 3 decades advocating in high-stake legal, logistical, and regulatory arenas, David shifted his focus to divorce and family law mediation, a choice born from a belief that conflict doesn't have to define separation. Based in Highland Park, Illinois, and trained in divorce mediation, Northwestern University, David found Fein Legal Solutions to offer a different path, one built on constructive dialogue, real-world clarity, and deep respect for the emotional as well as legal landscape of divorce. He's seen firsthand how adversarial processes can drain families and how mediators can help rescue dignity, hope, and cooperation when it most matters. So you'll hear how his commitment to thoughtful advocacy and humanity informs every conversation he holds with couples in transition. So stay with us as we dive into why mediation might just be the strongest way through divorce. So welcome to the show, David.
Thank you, Becky. Great to be here.
Yeah, you're welcome. And I appreciate we just met a few days ago. I think somehow we got connected, and you jumped right in. You're like, you know what? Hey, I'll come and help and serve people. So thank you for doing that. So tell everybody kind of what the backstory is of what got you into this industry. Why did you choose it? Sounds like you had a pivot during that, where now you really are very passionate about mediation, and why that's a good choice.
Yeah, well, my backstory is kind of an interesting one. I went through divorce mediation myself. When I went through divorce, I wasn't very familiar with it, even though I was a lawyer. And I found it very powerful. And I truly believe that it helped heal. It helped the family move from family 1.0 to family 2.0. Really helped set the stage for successful co-parenting and the like. And I was at a little bit of a career transition, and had spoken to the mediator who had handled my divorce. And coming out of COVID, her business had gotten very busy. And she suggested that I might be an excellent mediator, and if I was interested, to follow up. And I came in that Saturday, watched a mediation, and then reported for duty on Monday morning. And the rest is history. And I've been doing this for approximately 3 years now.
Wow.
And that's kind of how I found my way back to mediation as a practitioner, not as a participant, as an individual going through divorce.
Yeah. So what interested you the most when, I mean, like obviously you had your own personal experience, but what was that experience with that moment? You're like, wow, I could do this for other people.
Well, I watched, and I
Yeah.
watched a very high conflict initial mediation session.
Mm-hmm.
And I was moved by the fact that the mediator was able to control the situation in a way that allowed both parties to feel heard, but was able to take the temperature down in a way that got them focused on what was important to them individually
Mm.
and important to them on what they wanted everything to look at like when they came out on the other end, and how listening and active listening is so important, uh, certainly in mediation, but it's a good life lesson too. By actively listening, you pick up things, and people say things, and there is a way to maybe take down the stress, the anxiety, the emotion by doing that. And I was moved by the power of that, and felt that I could contribute to that and could do that well. And over these past 3 years, have participated either on my own or with a co-mediator in over 150, almost 200 mediations. So it's been very active, and
Yes.
I've really jumped in with 2 feet to it.
Well, you know, and I didn't even tell you this before we started, but as I was going through my second divorce and dealing with very, very high conflict litigation, I should say, I was being trained and getting my degree as a mediator. So I also see the power of, I mean, it is really a beautiful dance when you have a good mediator to be able to have both parties heard. I know some people may be listening and watching this and going, but there's no way, you know, I'm dealing with someone that's so difficult. What would you say to them on how do you navigate that when you have someone that's very difficult? And can you mediate? Can you go to mediation? Can you have a successful mediation or make progress when you're dealing with a very difficult personality type?
I would say the answer is yes. It's possible, and many times having that third party neutral acting as, you know, the referee, if you will, in that, and trying to remind both participants why they're there. And I think one of the tools of mediation is reminding people that they have the ability to control the outcome. There's no judge here. I, as the mediator, cannot order them to do anything. All I can do is to get them talking to one another and trying to address the issues that need to be addressed in mediation. You know, I think in high conflict, and one of the tools I like to use is to focus, if there are children involved, minor children, focus on that piece of it first. Because even in a high conflict situation, I think when you're focusing on the children and your children and doing what's best for your children, that has an amazing ability to sort of take that temperature down. And even with the most difficult individuals, can get them to focus on what needs to be focused on for that.
So David, that's very interesting, I think, is that your technique is to start with the kids because that brings the humanity in on both parts, right? These are kind of getting it out of them and putting it into, okay, what's most important in these kids? And then starting using that as a foundational. That's
and
brilliant.
as the foundational, you know, it's also easier to reach agreements
Right.
on things involving humans as
Right.
opposed to property and
Things.
money and
Yeah.
things. And you know, everyone starts the mediation by saying, you know, all they want is the best for their children and what's best for their children. And I've never been in a mediation where someone, you know, gruffs at that or doesn't articulate that. And that's right. And it should be that way. And I find that you can get little wins, if you will, in the mediation process by starting on that piece of the equation. Now, sometimes that's not possible, but most of the time it is. And whether they want to, focus on something else, look, it's their process. But I really try to impress upon them that it's much more important to get those issues ironed out because they're trickier. There's more logistics involved. The other things are just money and how are you going to split them up? And I'm not trying to diminish that. That's important. But the human aspect, I think, and dealing with family and how you're going to co-parent these children is a much more meaningful way to start the process.
Well, I'm happy to hear that because I've never heard somebody explain it that way. And it's when you've got a really good mediator, you've got all these little tools of things to say, what to do to help bring us to a place of agreement. Because it really is a dance. Like I was saying to you before we started, I feel like mediation is a beautiful dance if you can help facilitate that. The other thing I was going to ask you is, do you find that when people are going to mediation, do they have attorneys? Do they not have attorneys? Or if they're represented by an attorney, do they need an attorney with them at the mediation or not?
Great question. And I get that a lot. The trend I've seen in these last few years is many people wanting to do this without an attorney. Mm-hmm. So I see a lot of individuals without attorneys wanting to begin the mediation process. It's a smaller pool of people who have attorneys and want to do attorney-assisted mediation. What I always tell clients is obviously you have the right to retain a lawyer. And while I happen to be an attorney mediator, when I'm mediating, I'm not your attorney. I'm not your spouse's attorney. I have to be very clear about that, and that I can't give legal advice when I'm acting with my mediator hat. We can talk about the law, and we can talk about what the statute says, but I can't give legal advice. So many times clients will retain attorneys on a limited scope basis, hire an attorney to act almost like a consultant. Maybe.
Okay, so people don't know that. They actually don't know that they can do that. And most attorneys won't tell you that. So explain a little bit more about that, of like not hiring an attorney to represent you, but kind of be there as a mentor.
Yeah, I mean, what I've found is many people cost conscious about the process. Mm-hmm. So a lot of them are loath to hire attorneys, or that maybe they don't have the resources, but they don't think they have the resources that they want to spend to that. Mm-hmm. And so it's all about education. And I think that's the hardest thing about mediation, why more people don't choose that first. If you call a divorce attorney who is a full-time divorce lawyer, they may not, lead with mediation.
Right.
They may not focus on mediation. They may mention it as an option. But I think, when you pick up that phone, when you take that step, which is a hard step to take to start beginning that process, it's more likely than not that the first call you make is who you're going to go with. Mm-hmm. It's stressful to make the calls. You just want someone to listen to you and to help you through this problem that you have. And so, I find if I'm not the first call, I'm probably not going to find that client, that potential mm-hmm. client, or they're going to come to me after a judge says, you guys should not be fighting about this. You should mediate this, which isn't mandatory really in Illinois, and judges don't always.
I was going to say, I think it's becoming more mandatory because the courts don't want to hear this stuff. They want other people to deal with it because the attorneys aren't handling it. So they'll throw you to mediation, which isn't always a bad thing. No. And I was even thinking when we first started this, I was like, I wonder if there's like mediators that work specifically for people who are married that have conflict, you know what I mean? Just to keep them together, kind of like a counselor, but a real mediator saying, what's the issue? Let's come to a conclusion and help them work through it while they're married rather than having to go to divorce. That was just a thought that it came to me.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of similarities to that, and
Mhm.
I've participated in what I would call family mediations that were
Mhm.
not about divorce, but other family dynamics. You know, where there's a communication a problem or someone's estranged, and there's those tools and the power of mediation can work in that setting.
Good
You
work.
know, very well. So yes, back to your original question, I find clients, they may or may not want sort of that legal
Mhm.
voice, maybe a check on the mediation process. Maybe you bring an agreement that was reached in mediation and you want to get their input on that. So they're providing that kind of input to you, respecting the mediation process. I find most family law attorneys say they are mediation friendly, which is
Mhm.
great. Uh, but do they lead with mediation? Is that really the focus? No, it's not the focus of their practice. They're litigators.
Mhm.
That's how they're trained. That's how they think. And there is that inherent conflict of your obligations as an attorney to vociferously advocate for your client to your greatest extent based on the facts you have and within the law. And that's a different mindset. That's a different obligation that the attorney has as opposed to mediation, right? So when you're in mediation, you're trying to be conciliatory. You're trying to hear the other person. You're trying to reach agreements. And maybe those agreements, maybe you have a strong legal argument for something different. But the idea of mediation, of course, is to reduce the conflict and to come to agreements on your own without the need for litigation or really the court system. Uh,
Right.
and I think that's the part about it that I really enjoy. That's the part about it where I like to help because, as I know from my own experience, even being a lawyer, I felt while in the divorce process, I felt like it was a little bit of a fog. You don't really know what you know, and it's stressful, it's anxiety breeding, and you just want to get through the process. That's how I felt. And so helping reduce that anxiety and letting people know it will be okay. You're going to control this process. I'm there to guide the ship, but you and your spouse are going to run the process and make your own decisions is empowering. And that empowerment, I think, really helps people sort of move on and move from maybe being stuck. And that part, I like helping people with that.
So what do you think? I mean, you said you've done like over 150 of these mediations. I mean, I'm assuming or have you been doing most of them online, by the way,
I'd
or
say
virtually?
it's a mix.
Yeah.
I prefer, if possible, for initial mediations to be in person.
Mm.
There's
Okay.
something about the dynamic when you're all in a room together, but that's not always possible.
Hmm.
Sometimes clients do not want to be in the same room with each other. It can be triggering, in
Hmm.
various ways. And Zoom or video is a preferred alternative for that. So, um, again, I'm here to serve the client and whatever they want to do that's going to make them most comfortable, I want to support. And sometimes their distance doesn't allow the in person, and then we do it over online. So yeah, that's definitely a trend.
And so with having doing so many, what are some of the top mistakes that people make when it comes to preparing for mediation?
Well, the one thing I tell people is like, don't feel like you need to prepare anything
Mm.
necessarily. I like to tell clients in mediation to think about your goals for the mediation process, and to think a little deeper than I just want my kids to be okay. Like
Hmm.
maybe there are some concrete things, almost like a business plan, right? And if you stay if the goal can be kept front and center, it helps keep you on track. So, for example, a client comes in and says, I can't afford the house on my own. I want to stay in the house till the kids are grown and flown, till they go off to college. That's a goal. And then we see if we can achieve that goal. It may or may not be achievable, but hearing someone articulate what is important to them individually is really helpful to the mediation process overall, and keeps them focused and keeps them on track. And so I like that. I like to do the goal setting sort of thing, and come back to that in the next session, or maybe reach out one-on-one with them in between sessions to see if they've thought about that and articulated that. And I really encourage them to say that to each other, so that they can each hear that in a mediation session. That either is going to highlight where the conflict will be, or maybe removes issues that one thought there would be. Because generally speaking, a lot of issues with couples facing divorce are communication, right? They maybe have a hard time communicating. So the fear, the anxiety over that can, again, be reduced when you're hearing people articulate goals. When they're like, oh, that's not really an issue anymore. Great.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. And I would say for someone that's listening and kind of, I know you said we don't prepare a whole lot, but what are some documents, maybe financial documents that you recommend that they have in place before they come to mediation?
Yeah. So like the advice I usually give is, hey, you're in mediation now, you're talking about divorce. So first off, business as usual. Don't go buy a car. Don't go buy a luxury boat. Don't go make large purchases while you're in this. Do things as you normally do. But if you need something, like you got to buy a new car because your car broke down or something, okay, that's a legit real life thing. But communicate with your soon-to-be ex-spouse. And so, that's one of those things that I say first. Second, when clients ask, what documents should I gather? Well, it's your bank accounts, it's your investment accounts, it's your retirement accounts, it's your assets, it's your things, it's your home, the value of your home, if you have an appraisal, mortgage statement, if you have a mortgage on your home. And
what if they can't get that information? Like, what do you say at that point?
So if they don't have access to it, maybe one spouse has access and the other doesn't. That's fine. They don't need to come to the mediation with that. What I like to do is interview them about their finances, each of them, and ask them separate questions and let them each answer. And then I come up with a list. And usually after the first session, I'll send them a list and say, please obtain the last 3 months of statements for these accounts that you told me you had. And that way the onus is on both of them individually, and then they're shared with the other person. Everything that you gather in mediation, I like to share, with the other. And I tell them that this is an open and transparent process. You are going to have to swear to the court ultimately that you've been honest and open about your finances with one another. You're signing a document to a judge that says that. So you need to be honest here. You can't hide things. It will come out. And you're held to that obligation. And let me tell you, you ever want to see a judge mad? It's when someone violates one of their rules.
Yes, the court order. But I mean, for some people though, I mean, I can imagine, even for me, I was kind of telling you a little bit about my mediation process before, is that I went to mediation and we had no documents, nothing was provided. He was unwilling to do that. And that caused us to have an issue, because it's like, we need the numbers to be able to mediate and to know. So what would you say to somebody that's really struggling with that? Can you still proceed?
It's tough to proceed in mediation if one party or both parties are not being open, honest, and transparent, and providing the information that's necessary to make the decisions in mediation, much like the court wouldn't be able to make a decision in litigation if a party to it is not providing financial information. So I remind them that they're going to have to do that in court or here. So you can, if you want this mediation to work, you have to do that. And if they're not, and I've had clients who, one of them just for whatever reason was dragging their feet and not providing information necessary to make decisions. Unfortunately, we had to terminate the mediation process because it wasn't going to succeed. And that's the reality of mediation. As a mediator, I have no power to compel like a judge does. I can't order things. I can ask. I can ask repeatedly. I can ask sternly. But at the end of the day, it's a voluntary process. And unless those volunteers are going to participate, it probably won't work.
Yeah, and I kind of mentioned this before, is that for me personally, I ended up using subpoenas because that was really the only way that I could get the information rather than going back and forth and back and forth and back and forth with the court, because that uses up a lot of time, energy, just everything. I just finally got to the point where I'm like, okay, subpoena it, get the information back within a couple of weeks, and then I can make more decisions. And from that point, and obviously, if they have attorneys, they can do that before mediation. If it's a little bit more of an aggressive move, so it's not. It's really tricky. It's tricky because I have also seen, David, the miracle that a good mediator can be. And you think that it's a very high conflict, and you don't think, but holding the space that you can, if you're open enough to possibilities. And I kind of like that what you said is don't plan too much, because just have an overall feeling of like, what's your goal? Now just be willing to let go of the how we're going to get there. Then that gives the mediator the power and the ability to really massage it until you can get to the point. And you walk away and you go, wow, how did they do that? Like, I've been in a different mediation, and I'm like, that was brilliant. What they did is they got us to a settlement because they saw what was important to us and what was important to them, and was able to stay neutral enough. So that's the power of you and the services that you do. And it's probably very rewarding when you get to that point when you're like, okay, I made a difference today. Because sometimes you think, oh, and sometimes in the mediator, I don't know, maybe you can talk to this, is sometimes in the middle of the mediation, you're just like, I don't know if we're going to get these guys, to settle.
Yeah. I mean, look, as a mediator, I bring over 30 years of professional experience to the process. And, you've come across so many people and so many experiences in your life at this point. And yeah, I bring all that to the table. And yeah, sometimes you're just in the back of your mind, you're like, this is not going to work. This is not going to work. And then sometimes like there's that breakthrough moment where something clicks and maybe you didn't think it would click. And, I like that as a media, the challenge of that. Right. And I find that most of the time, it's allowing people the opportunity to be heard first and foremost. And, there are ways to get to, agreements, even in high conflict situations, because these same issues have to be addressed in the court. So you're either going to fight about it and get nasty about it and have a trial and bring all of that stuff in, or you can sit in this conference room and sort this out. And for some people, that's just not going to work in some situations. But, I always tell people you have nothing to lose if you try mediation and it fails, because the fallback's the same, right? It's where you were inclined to go anyway. Let's see what we can do. Maybe we can limit issues. Maybe you only need to litigate a small fraction of things.
Which is what people don't realize too, is you can mediate certain things. And then if you need to go to the court, you don't have to take the whole bag of issues. You can just take that one issue, which is a really, really good point. to consider for sure. And do you do mediations nationwide, or are you just in Illinois?
I have just done them historically in Illinois.
Okay.
In Illinois, we have different court systems in different counties.
Yeah.
I think we have the largest court system in the U.S. in what's called Cook County, which is the greater Chicago area and surrounding. And then I do work in the counties that surround Cook County as well. And I guess one thing I wanted to say that I forgot in that last answer is process. Making sure that the participants understand the process is really important. And it's really key that they understand that. And so when they understand the process and kind of how we're going to incrementally address these things, again, I think it keeps them focused on it.
Yeah, it gives them a framework, right? And people
that's
need
really
to.
Important.
What would you say to somebody? This is kind of one of my last questions too. Is it what would you say to somebody? Because I thought about this earlier. When somebody is in a mediation, it is very important for a mediator to give equal time to each party. But I was just talking to someone the other day, and she's like, "Oh yeah, Becky, we went on a 7-hour mediation, and he got 90% of the time." And I was like, how does somebody, I guess, advocate for themselves in that kind of situation with a mediator?
Yeah. When someone, I've found many times where you have one personality that's just maybe more introverted.
Yeah.
Maybe they're showing a little more discomfort in the situation. So as a mediator, there's a couple tools you can do. I mean, one, you really do need to ensure that there's equal airtime, if you will. And if I feel that someone is kind of being reserved or not participating, I mean, I will call a timeout. I would say, let's take a break. Maybe say it's a bathroom break, but really it's to make sure that person who's maybe being a little more quiet is okay. And if we're in the room, I'll separate them and go into a different room. If we're on a Zoom or a Teams or whatever, I'll put them in a waiting room and just talk to that one person just to check in and make sure everything's okay. And to let them know, I need them to be a more active participant. What's holding you back?
Kick in the rear end.
Yeah. And it's really important, because even if they are quiet, I can sense if someone feels that the other party is dominating the conversation, and those are dynamics in relationships, right?
Yeah.
And you pick up on that pretty quickly as a mediator, and it doesn't, you see that, and you need to guard against that. And so it's a skill. You can do it a lot of different ways.
Well, I appreciate the work that you're doing, and I appreciate that you pivoted with all your experience. You pivoted into something that you could really see is a real need for people in the time, basically because of your own personal experience. And I love that. So here's my last question for you: is what does divorcing strong mean to you?
Yeah, to me, divorcing strong is setting up couples for success when they walk out the door. And what that means to me is, if there are minor children involved, that they have a working parenting arrangement, that they recognize that things change and things evolve and people evolve. And that may mean that agreement needs to evolve in the future. And I remind them of that all the time. If there's one participant who's not really strong on finances, well, that's going to require you as a mediator to spend more time with them, getting them stronger on understanding finances. That's a big focus. And empower them to make those decisions, empower them, give them the tools so that they can be successful coming out of the mediation, not only, rehabilitating the family into its new mode, but also themselves as an individual to stand on their own 2 feet, to understand their finances, make decisions, and know that you don't have to have all the answers. There are plenty of professionals out there who can help, and I don't have all the answers. And if there's a specialist that's needed either during the mediation or after, I like to hook them up with trusted professionals who can help them, whether it's a wealth management advisor, whether it's a mortgage broker, whether it's a real estate broker, whether it's a estate planning attorney, like giving them the tools. So when I get done with my mediations at the end, I give them a checklist of things they need to consider going forward. They're not things that I'm going to help them with, but they're things that they need other professionals to help with. Powers of attorney, wills, those sorts of things, like beneficiaries on your investments and other things. Like, you're going to need to update that. And so give them those tools and know that I'm still here. I'm not going away. It's not goodbye. When they're done, that they should feel free to reach out. Things need to change. Agreements need to be modified. We can do that. You can do that in mediation. So
so it's building that team, that strong team around you to keep you going in the right direction, and think about the things that you may not be thinking about at that time, because it's a little crazy, as you know.
It takes a village, right?
Yeah,
and that there's so much truth to that statement, and divorce is a great example of that.
It really does take a village to get divorced, and I am a total testament to that. And I always say, find your tribe, use your tribe. So thank you so much, David, for being willing to come on our show today and share your wisdom. And thank you. If anyone wants to contact David, make sure you go to his website, and the links will all be provided below here. But thanks for joining us. And hold on just 1 second. I'll just say goodbye. Thank you guys for joining on another episode of Divorcing Strong podcast. I've been Becky Sampson, your host. And as always, we always have Tuesday through Thursday is when we do our podcasting lives. You're welcome to join us and also share these episodes. This is a brand new one to put my the QR code up there if you want the divorce terms, so that you can better navigate the divorce, knowing the terms, how to talk to your attorney, your mediator, anybody that's involved in the divorce when it comes to legal terms. So anyway, thanks for joining us, and we will see you on the next episode. Thanks for listening to the Divorcing Strong podcast. This episode is sponsored by Only Subpoenas, where we make subpoenas simple, powerful, and 100% compliant. If you're having a hard time getting the information you need to settle for a fair and equitable divorce, let us help you. Whether you're an attorney or you're navigating divorce on your own, subpoenas can uncover the truth, secure the evidence you need, and level the playing field. To see how we can help, book an appointment by visiting our website at onlysubpoenas.com.